we talk about all things spooky, strange, and a little bit unexplainable while I sip my wine.
And I stick to my coffee, or in this case, some chocolate because I need the sugar. I'm your resident witch, Miranda.
And I'm Christal, your resident wino.
So, guess what? Christal and I just got back from a cruise to Mexico. Not just the two of us, but our families as well.
Hell yeah, we did. I don't feel fully recovered yet. I'm still tired. I'm still slightly sunburned. And I swear I can still feel the boat moving.
I am not fully recovered yet either because I got a cold. It was a bad cold, and you might be able to hear it in my voice. I'm sorry if I cough. I'll try to mute myself. But yeah, it took a while for me to stop feeling the boat rocking. But you know what? All things considered, from me forgetting my bags, I toiletry bag at home, to finding a freaking human tooth in my stateroom, yeah. I had a great time.
Yeah. She was welcomed onto the ship with a tooth in her room and pills.
Yeah, in my stateroom. But yeah. That phantom rocking feeling is just so, weird, not gonna lie.
It's disorienting. Like you're standing still, but your body thinks you're not.
And your brain goes, wee. But like I said, the trip itself is great. Being on the ship at night feels different, I think, than during the day, especially if you're, out walking and looking at the ocean, because literally all you see is black.
Yeah, during the day, everything feels normal. And then there's music and people are everywhere. You're busy and distracted.
But at night, when everything quiets down, you start noticing more, right?
And the sounds stand out more. The creaking, the random thuds, things you probably wouldn't even register during the day.
And logically, it's just a ship, right?
Right. But it doesn't always feel that way when you're half asleep at 2 or 3 in the morning.
That's kind of what got us thinking about tonight's topic, anyway.
Because when you actually stop and think about it, cruise ships are a pretty unique environment.
You're in the middle of the ocean, and you're far away from land.
There are thousands of people on board.
And you don't really have the option to leave if something feels off. And then there's the part people don't really talk about very often.
Yeah, which is that people do die on cruise ships.
It's not super common for any individual passenger, but across the industry, it happens regularly, apparently, and that's just,
There are a couple hundred deaths a year worldwide on cruise ships.
Which means statistically it's happening every single week.
And most of those are natural causes, age, health issues, things like that.
But when you think about where it's happening,
in the middle of the ocean on a moving ship,
it makes you wonder what that experience is like.
And whether everything always moves on.
Or stays on board. But before we get into the actual stories, I wanted to take a look at how often this really happens. There are a lot of sources that estimate around 200 deaths on cruise ships each year, like Christal said, and that number isn't exact because not all cruise lines or countries publicly report their data. So realistically, it is probably higher. Most of those deaths are from natural causes, again, like she said, like things like heart attacks or existing health conditions, but that's not the whole picture. There are also deaths from accidents, overdoses, suicides, and in rare cases, even homicide.
And when you actually break it down, it gets a little more real. So the majority, about 65 to 70%, are natural causes. That's roughly 80 to 100 people a year. And it's usually things like cardiac events. A lot of cruise passengers are older, so medically that part makes sense. Then you've got accidental injuries, which account for 15 to 20%. So that's around 20 to 30 deaths a year. And that includes falls, onboard accidents, things like that. After that, there's drowning, which is about 5 to 10 deaths a year. That can be from people going overboard or even pool-related incidents. Then there are infectious diseases. Miranda, you just got sick from the cruise.
No, I didn't.
That's around 5 to 10 people annually.
I bet you if they clean their freaking staterooms well, that number would go down.
Well, it usually depends on outbreaks and overall passenger health. Don't go on a cruise if you're sick, people.
Honestly, come on.
People can't get away from your sick butt. And then the rarest category, but probably the one that people think about most, homicides and suicides. That's about 1 to 5 cases a year, so it's not common, but it does happen.
And when you put all of this together, it really enforces that these ships aren't dangerous.
But people are still dying on them every week.
I think it's really easy to hear statistics like that and kind of disconnect from them, like they're just numbers, right? But these are real situations and real people. And when you start looking into actual cases, it changes how you feel.
Yeah, because these aren't just categories. These are things that actually happen on ships full of people in the middle of a vacation, and some of them are really hard to hear. One case was Tamara Lorraine Tucker in 2018. She was on a 4-night cruise out of Florida on the Carnival Elation with her long-term partner. They got into an argument in their cabin late at night, and he later admitted that he strangled her and pushed her over the balcony. She fell 2 decks down and died from the impact. Another case, Christy Manzanares, in 2017, she was on an Alaskan cruise with her husband and their 3 daughters. They were in adjoining cabins on the Emerald Princess. And if you look this up, they actually tell you exactly what room numbers they are, but I'm just not on here.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband beat her to death and then tried to drag her body out onto the balcony to throw her overboard. He was stopped by another passenger.
Men. Fucking, didn't we have a thing about men? Like we have one saying, like, anyway, that's awful.
We need a sticker that just says men.
Yeah. So there is also Omarosa Tenorio in 2018. She was on the Royal Princess with her husband, and witnesses reported seeing a man strangle her on the Lido deck and then throw her overboard. She didn't fall into the water. She hit a lifeboat several decks below with enough force to shatter the glass. Passengers reported seeing blood and broken glass, and the ship had to be held while everything was investigated.
And then there are cases that end in more than one death. In 2015, Darla J. Mellinger was on a Caribbean cruise with her husband on the Rendam. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's how I would say it.
Okay. It was supposed to be a holiday trip, but after an argument, he broke glass in their cabin, used it as a weapon, and killed her. And then he took his own life in the bathroom.
Not all of these are intentional, though. I mean, all of those that we just talked about are intentional, but then some are tragic accidents. In 2019, a 16-year-old boy named Laurent Mercer died while trying to climb between balconies after being locked out of his room. He fell from the ship and landed on the pier below. And as awful as that is, it's not an isolated kind of incident. There have been other cases where people try to climb, or they lean too far, or try to show off, and then it ends the same way.
You guys, if you get lost out of your room, just ask the attendant. There's always an attendant in your hallway, and I promise you they remember who you are. They remember your name and what room number you are. I don't know how they do it. They have the most amazing memories ever, but they do.
And you can't walk 6 feet without running into somebody who worked on the ship. So, like, be smarter, guys.
And all of this is happening in one place. On the same kind of ships people go on for vacations, celebrations, honeymoons.
Thousands of people all packed into one little tiny space, floating in the middle of the ocean.
No land, no lights, just water in every direction.
And when something happens out there, it doesn't feel the same as it does on land.
On land, things end. There are boundaries, places to leave, distant from what happened.
But on a ship, there's nowhere for it to go.
The room stays the same. The hallway stays the same. The ship just keeps moving like nothing ever happened.
And everyone else keeps sleeping or eating or laughing right on top of it.
Which makes you start to wonder if everything actually leaves.
Because there are stories from passengers and from crew who live out there for months at a time
about things that never left. Before we get into the first story, I do want to say this really quick. All of the stories we're about to share are based on real accounts. They've been reworded a tiny bit for clarity and readability.
But the details themselves have not been changed.
Yeah, we didn't add anything extra or take anything away. We just made them easier to follow as a story.
So what you're hearing is still exactly what was experienced, just told in a way that flows a little better.
Which honestly makes them even creepier.
Because we're good storytellers.
So this story comes from a user named Naval Eye on the cruise critic community. They say, I had never experienced anything like this before, ever. A friend and I boarded the Queen Mary 2 about 2 weeks ago, and everything seemed completely normal, except at night. I kept hearing these tapping noises. At first, I didn't think much of it, but they were happening regularly. At one point, my friend even turned to me and said,
"Stop tapping."
But I wasn't. Still, the tapping would come and go, and eventually, I just ignored it. A few days later, something happened to my friend. While I was in the bar, she was in the cabin getting ready for dinner. And suddenly, she had a severe choking fit. Bad enough that she almost passed out. After that, she ended up getting off the ship in New York. And that's when things got strange. Not long after she left, I came down with a 24-hour stomach bug. So I was stuck in the cabin, room 6065, just lying in bed, reading the same book over and over. After a while, I became very aware that I wasn't alone. I could hear breathing, and it wasn't mine. The hairs on my body stood straight up. A little while later, I felt the bed move, like someone had gotten onto it. I turned and looked, but there was no one there, even though I could still feel something, a presence. I was lying face down when I suddenly felt something else, a leg, laying across my calf muscles. And then I heard a voice, a distorted female voice saying,
"It's only me. It's only me."
But I didn't hear it out loud. It was just in my head, like some kind of out-of-body experience. At that point, I had a choice, leave or try to communicate, and I decided not to run. I sat up on the bed and I asked if it could hear me. Immediately, I got a response, tapping, scratching, all around me. I started asking questions, and every time, I got the same kind of response. So I tried something simple. I said, 1 tap for yes, 2 taps for no. Over the next 3 days, I asked question after question, and something answered me. I got to know this entity. I experienced different sides of it. A normal side, a humorous side, and a dark side. Some questions it answered, some it didn't. But everything I experienced happened exactly as I've described it. Then came the part that really stayed with me. After I started feeling better, I went out one night and came back very late. The next day, I slept in. Woke up around 1 p.m. And as I was waking up, I became aware of frantic tapping and scratching all around me. Not on me, around me. It went on for a while, and then suddenly, the phone rang. Just once. That's what fully woke me up. The tapping and scratching were still happening, but this time there was something else. A feeling. Strong, clear happiness. Like something was excited that I was awake, like it had been waiting. I asked it, "Did you make the phone ring?" And immediately I got a loud, solid thump. The poster ended the story by saying, "If this doesn't open your mind to what's out there, I don't know what will."
No, absolutely not. Mm-mm.
So it's only me part.
Yeah, no, that was the worst part. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean only? What do you mean? What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Yeah. Fascinating, but also, like, scary. I think I might have chosen, depending on if I was alone or not, or I don't know, I might have chosen to just leave and not stay, and who knows. Anyway.
Would have been like, let's talk.
The next story here, we're calling The Future in the Cabin. The source is user Love Cruisin' in Music, Cruise Critic Community, and of course, like we said, it's reworded for clarity. And so, the story says, I had just returned from my 10th cruise, this time on the Allure of the Seas, and experienced something completely new. We boarded on a Sunday and everything was fine. Until Wednesday night. There were 3 of us in the cabin. My friend was sleeping in the bed beside me, and my sister was on the pull-out bed. Sometime during the night, I woke up with this feeling, like someone was walking around the room, so I opened my eyes to look, and I saw what I thought was my friend, standing there, watching me sleep. But something didn't feel right, because she didn't look like herself. She looked like a man. That's when I turned my head to look at the bed beside me, and my friend was right there, still asleep. So I told myself I must be dreaming. I turned over and went back to sleep. The next morning, my sister and my friend both asked me something. They asked if I had felt like someone was in the room, like walking around between 4 and 5 in the morning. I told them what I had experienced, and they both said the same thing, that they felt a presence and that they heard someone walking. But neither of them saw anything. Neither of them saw the figure that I did. I told our stateroom attendant about it later, and his response was kind of unexpected. He said he wasn't surprised. He told me that people die on the ship, which I mean, I assumed, but I don't know if other guests had reported anything about our specific room. I didn't ask around. I didn't want to scare anyone. And honestly, I don't think I wanted to know.
Nope. I don't like that. Multiple people felt it.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it worse.
Yeah, because that takes it out of maybe you were dreaming territory.
Yeah, to like something that, this is actually something that happened and something was in that room with us.
This next story comes from Reddit, from a user named Lucida Dolce. My partner and I were just on the Symphony of the Seas, and I'm pretty sure we had some kind of paranormal experience. This was our 8th cruise, so I'd like to think we're pretty familiar with the normal sounds and movements of a ship. On the first night, we started hearing things shifting in our room, even the little coffee table. But we tried to brush it off and assume it was just the ship swaying. By the 3rd night, though, it got harder to explain. We heard what sounded like someone plopping down onto the couch in our cabin. And that's when it started to feel off. What really freaked me out was that things weren't where we left them. At first, I thought my partner was messing with me, but then I started noticing it happening when I was completely alone in the room. Like one time, I left my hat on the bed. I went into the washroom for just a minute, and when I came back out, it was hanging on the washroom door handle. And there was no one else there. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little spooked.
See, See, and that's the kind of stuff that gets me. Because you're like, oh, am I going crazy? Maybe I misremembering something. Maybe, like you don't really want to like admit it.
Yeah, it's the small thing, and it's intentional.
Yeah, like obviously something is actively moving things, but again, you're always like in the back of your mind, no, it was just, I didn't remember I put it there.
It's actively moving things and waiting for you to notice.
It's because it's bored in the afterlife, so thanks. Thanks for that. The next story we're calling The Smile in the Mirror. It was submitted by user J_boy19 in the Reddit r/paranormal. He says, I don't really believe in ghosts or anything paranormal, but this experience I had was interesting. I don't really know how to explain it. But when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my whole family went on a cruise during spring break, which, side note, is when we went on our cruise, but we did not have any experience, at least I didn't.
Sadly, I did not either.
Yeah. But back to the story. It was a carnival ship. Really nice, really fancy. What year was this? Really nice and really fancy in a carnival ship?
Hey, the carnival ship I got married on was super nice and fancy, and it was amazing.
Oh, well, lucky you. Ours wasn't. I'm just, just still flabbergasted about having found a human tooth in my stateroom.
The ship we were on. Well, the ship that I got married on, it had just redone the entire ship. It was that ship that was stuck out at sea for like 2 weeks with no electricity or water. Then when it finally came back, a ship or something ran into it, so there was a giant hole in the side of it. They had to redo the entire ship, and it was right before we got on to get married. So I think we might have been the first or the second cruise after they fixed it up.
Well, it's lucky then, I guess. So that is pretty cool.
I was panicking. Everyone kept calling me and being like, did you hear what happened to your ship this time? I'm like, stop telling me.
Especially right before a wedding. Oh, God.
Yes. Okay.
Anyway.
This dude was 8 or 9.
Yeah, so he's 8 or 9, and he noted that the cabins were small, but that didn't really matter. Okay, back to his voice. I was sleeping on the couch, and right next to me there was a dresser with a big mirror. The trip was great overall, but one night, while we were at sea, something happened. It was late, and everyone else was asleep, and I was lying there in the cabin, trying to fall asleep, when I noticed something in that mirror. I saw a face, a glowing fluorescent white face. It looked like it was in the mirror, almost like it was covering my own face. It looked like what you'd imagine a ghost to look like the white sheet with eyes and a mouth cut out. At first, it wasn't looking at me. It was moving around slightly with a frown on its face, like it was searching for something. And I just stared at it. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. But then suddenly it stopped. And it looked directly at me. And it smiled. That's when I felt it. This overwhelming sense of dread and fear. I panicked and pulled the covers over my head, just hoping it wouldn't hurt me. And after a little while, I calmed myself down enough to look again, and it was gone. I was terrified. I ran to my parents' bed and told them everything, though they didn't really believe me. But they said they would stay up the next night to see if anything happened. The next night they looked, and they told me they figured it out. They said what I saw was just a glowing sticker in the cabin, one of those safety markers for the life jackets. Every cabin had them. They tried to reassure me that everything was fine, and I tried to believe them. But I knew that wasn't what I saw. Because I was looking straight ahead into the mirror. If it had been a sticker, I would have had to turn my head and look up. And I didn't. I was staring right at it. So what was it?
Nope. Kids saying things like that, I don't like, especially in the mirror.
Dude, and then the fact that it reacted to him. Oh.
That's the part. It wasn't just there. It noticed him.
and then it smiled. Dude, if my kid came to me and was like, I saw something in the mirror, that mirror would be fucking covered immediately. I'm like, yeah, if I can take it out of the room because, a cruise or whatever, it would be covered. I would be, going to the dining room and getting a bunch of salt too to just spread around the room.
Salt. We're just going and getting all the salt off all of those little trays that are on the side with the ketchup and everything. We're just taking all of them.
It's just mind your business, okay? We've just got stuff to do.
This next story comes from Reddit from a user named FreeUFC. I've had a few paranormal experiences before, but this was the scariest. Many years ago, my family and I went on a cruise in the Mediterranean. It was on a ship called the Thompson Destiny of the Seas. It has a different name now. Okay, pause. I went and I looked this up to try and see what it's called now, but the Thompson Destiny of the Seas is something else. So I'm wondering if he's mixing up the name with something else. So I don't know. Anyway, my wife and daughter shared one room, and I stayed in another room with my son, who was about 6 years old at the time. One night, I woke up suddenly. I remembered checking the time. It was exactly 3 a.m. That's when I heard it. The wardrobe door opening, which didn't make sense because those doors have magnets on them. They don't just swing open, even in rough weather. And the sea was completely calm, like a lake. So I jumped up, and that's when I saw him. A man standing at the wardrobe, looking inside it. I shouted something. I don't even remember what. And he turned, looked straight at me, and then walked into the wardrobe. At that point, I didn't think it was a ghost. I thought there was an intruder in my room. And my first thought was my son. The room was small, maybe 12 feet by 6. So it would have taken me about a second to get from the bed to the wardrobe. I got up and went straight over, looked inside. No one. Then I checked the adjacent area, the only other place he could have gone. Nothing. So I started trying to make sense of it. The only logical way out would have been through the main door. But for that to happen, the wardrobe door would have had to close first. Because those rooms, if you don't have a suite, you guys, those rooms are so small.
So small.
If the door is open on the wardrobe, you can't get out. You have to close it before you open your main door.
Yeah.
Okay. And the main door was still locked. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat there in bed with the lights on. And then, about an hour later, it got worse. My son suddenly sat straight up in bed, almost like something out of The Exorcist. And he said,
"You don't care about the people on this ship, do you?"
And then he laid back down and went right back to sleep, like nothing had happened. That really freaked me out. And one more thing. The man I saw, he looked like Tom Petty wearing an old naval uniform.
Okay. Yeah. No, the kid. The kid, like sitting up.
It's that part for me. The kid, oh gosh.
Yeah, that's not just deciding. That's a friggin' interaction. That's what that is.
And whatever that was, knew he was there.
Ugh, don't they all? I feel like these ghosts just, like I said, just get bored and they're just like, what do you guys like? The nosy maids who like to just dig through your stuff just to see things, But anyway,
your next story, I just have to say this.
Okay.
The title is Jeffrey the Ghost Butler in Ghostbuster. And it's Joffrey.
Joffrey?
When you say it fancy, it's gotta be Joffrey.
Joffrey.
Okay.
Would you like me to take your coat? Anyway, like she said, Jeffrey the Ghost Butler. And this story was submitted by Deidre J6972 to the cruise critic community. She says, "My husband and I just returned from the Queen Mary 2 sailing out of New York City. We were staying in suite 9069, a butlered suite, and there is no question that there was a ghost butler in our room. We named him Joffrey. At first, it was just little things. He would load sugar into neat little piles when I made coffee. He would dump and break coffee mugs. And he was constantly opening and closing the bathroom doors. Weird, but not completely crazy. But this morning, that's what really confirmed it. I was taking an early bath and using the jacuzzi. It has these small, hard buttons you have to press to turn it on and off. When I finished, I turned the bubbles off, opened the drain, and got out to start getting dressed. As I was finishing getting dressed, the bubbles turned back on by themselves. And I could hear that the tub was still full of water. It turned out the drain must have closed again after I got out. So I said, "Thank you, Joffrey, for bringing that to my attention." And right after that, the intercom turned on. It made a quick noise, though no words, and then shut itself back off. And honestly, it made me a little sad to leave.
Okay, that one's different.
Yeah, it's still kind of creepy, but it's like not in the same way. He was just
Like, help.
yeah, exactly. He was just helpful. Yeah. All right, guys. That's all we have for today.
If you've made it this far, you might be rethinking your next cruise a little bit.
Or at least keeping the lights on in your cabin tonight if you are on a cruise.
Ooh. Same though. In my house, same. The lights on. There's some crazy things happening.
I'm also part of the thing that's like, you know what? Lights on, I guess I can see that, but I think I'd rather be in the dark because, I'm in denial. I can't see it. It can't see me.
Okay.
But seriously, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
And if you have your own paranormal experiences, especially if you've had something happen on a cruise ship or just anywhere, we definitely want to hear about it.
Oh, yes.
And also, we are considering, I think we're going to do this, we are going to add some true crime into our stories here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe mysterious ones or just crazy wackadoodle stories that you would never, think of or hear about. So, if you got any of those, message us about that as well.
We'll do some investigating.
Yes.
So you could email us your stories at
witchinandwinin@gmail.com.
That's
WITCHNANDWINEN@gmail.com.
And we might feature your story in a future episode. And when I say might, that's false. We will. Yeah.
We will.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget to like, rate, and review the show. It really helps us out and helps more people find us.
Yes, and we appreciate that more than you know.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Sleep tight. Don't let the cruise ship ghost bite. Horror movies. Stop when you're not looking.